Hi, welcome back to the channel. So I was a bit inspired just to consider the kind of archetypes that play out between Sagittarius and Aquarius in a general sense. I'm noticing a lot about how when Pluto is in Aquarius, there's a lot of ties with Sagittarius energy, and they both have a very prosperous relationship in a sextile aspect, which means a level of ease, a level of flow and grace. So this will be a bit of a tangential kind of presentation on the connections that I've found. I hope you enjoy it. So we'll begin. So Prometheus is obviously associated with Aquarius, the fire bringer. He brings fire, enlightenment, technology to keep humans warm down to humans from the gods, right? And Chiron is the centaur who, despite his animalistic nature, was actually quite kind, very nurturing. He healed a lot of people, even though he was wounded his entire life, yet he was immortal. So he was just kind of bearing the pain. And through that pain, it allowed him to kind of learn about medicine and heal any kind of heroes in the mythology. So they're both related to pain, definitely. Of course, Prometheus was chained to the Caucasus Mountains by the gods for revealing fire to humanity, and as punishment, his guts were being basically picked out for eternity before Chiron volunteered to take his place upon the rock on the mountain, since he figured I'm immortal and in pain anyways, and he always has this nurturing kind of aspect. So we see this kind of relationship between Sagittarius, this benevolence, this kind of guide that wants to at times could be angry at Aquarius for revealing knowledge willy-nilly for humanity, but at other times is kind of a protective figure and ends up shooting down the vulture that were picking out Prometheus's guts. So that's why we have now Centaur associated with Sagittarius, the 13th hidden zodiac sign, the healer of death that could bring you back from death, from the gateway of the underworlds. The 13th zodiac sign is associated with Ophiuchus, as well as Asclepius, as well as Chiron, which Chiron tutored Asclepius, right? So there's just so many kind of similar vibes there, and we all know from the tarot that the Temperance card is associated with temperance or alchemy, which is turning a venom into a cure, right? So let's just continue. There's definitely a sense of martyrdom between them. I mean, Jupiter, who rules Sagittarius, also rules Pisces, and we all know the Son of God, Christ, and that kind of willing to martyr themselves for the enlightenment of humanity. So that's definitely another kind of reoccurring theme between these two friends, I guess. What's also interesting is that since the time of Pluto was in Leo, which is the opposite sign of Aquarius, we do see a huge breakdown in the kind of masculine patriarchal structures of the nuclear family breaking down as well. There's a lot more freedom for uniqueness and people that perhaps are not heteronormative, straight, right? Alienation is also a huge thing. You know, both Chiron and Aquarius were very alienated. There's a kind of otherness, right? They were willing to go against the grain to present knowledge. So there's this kind of all represented with that kind of water sphere of the constellations, the great ocean of the cross we bear while striving for change and the breakdown of the old. So just as Jesus basically said, you know what, there's no more sins on earth, and the church, of course, bastardized this and said, no, 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 there's still sins and you still have to pay your dues to us. But Jesus said, I'm dying for all of your sins, right? There is no concept of sins. There is this kind of I think Adam Ellenboss goes into this concept of sins and how a lot of Aquariuses feel bad that they're always being more rebellious or innovative than those around them, and they tend to be punished for that. This is also kind of ties into Saturnian themes, which Saturn used to rule Aquarius back in ancient astrology before Uranus was discovered, though I definitely agree that Uranus is the modern ruler and we should consider it as such, but it also plays out that archetype of the son who overthrows their father, right? Saturn or Capricorn in some mythologies was said to overthrow his father, and then also other mythologies have Uranus is genitals were basically cast into the ocean, which is very oceanesque, very Piscean, very kind of all connected with that constellation to create Venus. And Venus is, as I record this in Pisces, its exaltation point. Also, as I film this, Saturn and Neptune are both in Pisces, so it's really bringing, and they're finishing up their transits there, so it's bringing this level of culmination to everything you've learned to do with Pisces before we actually have the North Node transit as well into Pisces shortly this month, January 2025. What's also interesting is that there is this kind of Plutonian element to both Aquarius and Sagittarius, just through the fact that the 13th zodiac sign, Ophiuchus, bridges the gap between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Um, and of course, there was so much pain that resulted from Prometheus giving fire down to humans. I mean, even in the life of Steve Jobs, who was prominent Aquarius native, we always see this kind of sad, tragic end almost. Another note is that Sagittarius and Aquarius are extremely intellectual and intellectually oriented. Fire with Sagittarius represents enlightenment, the kind of higher elevation of the chakras when everything you finally get a spark, right? And Aquarius definitely rules air signs, so that's about thoughts and the nervous system and that electrical spark that way. They both have associations to prophecy as well, with Sagittarius the arrow pointing towards the future. A lot of Sagittarius seek to expand their boundaries by traveling in the air, right? With planes. Sagittarius rules planes, and so does Aquarius, flying devices. Part of Asclepius, or the kind of healing rod, um, and Aquarius is associated with the rod, Scorpio with the snake, and then the wings that the snake takes represents the Kundalini rising, right? The flying dragon of enlightenment, which the dragon represents Rahu and Ketu, which is the north node and south node, the eclipse points of the sun and the moon. Ketu the moon, Rahu the sun. And we know that in Indian mythology, Rahu and Ketu, which Ketu represents a nakshatra in the Sagittarius zodiac subset, and Rahu represents, rules Shatabisha in the Aquarius zodiac subset of nakshatras. And so in the Indian mythology, Rahu and Ketu are the kind of two churning forces, which is symbolized in Aquarius' symbol with the two jagged lines of waves rocking back and forth to create Amrit or mana or immortal life or electricity, right? And we know this as well through when Uranus was discovered in Aquarius, when Pluto was also discovered. These are times when we realize just how powerful the smallest shifts of breaking the boundaries in our daily life, aka the atom, splitting the atom, and what that kind of creates. And just by the nature that Sagittarius is willing to sacrifice themselves to take over the pain of Aquarius, just shows you that kind of nurturing force that this beneficial connection can serve. Aquarius does not ever like to be bound or constrained. They like freedom just as much as Sagittarius do. And naturally, of course, as a byproduct of increased knowledge, there is a sense of alienation from your community, right? It's hard to discuss things with people if they're not even on the same base or foundation as you. In the mythology, Chiron was a centaur, so not exactly a very idealistic creature, and Prometheus was a titan. So again, not exactly very revered naturally. So they're both kind of have an otherness to them. And I think the kind of tragicness is more so about people in power that try to attack change that threatens their stability. I mean, we can just see that through the kind of aspects Aquarius creates with other signs. Like with Leo, it's an opposition. So Leo represents the figureheads of society, the celebrities, the ones that kind of stand above the rest, right? So there is a kind of opposition already naturally there. And then with Taurus, there's definitely kind of a square going on there. So that's kind of, Taurus can rule luxury, people who work in finance, and they wouldn't be happy with the kind of changes that Aquarius themes bring. Another interesting note is now, as Pluto is fully in Aquarius for the next 20-year cycle, it's kind of interesting how those who were born in the 90s and the early 2000s had Uranus in Aquarius, which is kind of priming them to be prepared for this era, because Pluto in Aquarius, as it comes now, is when these people born with Uranus in Aquarius, you can see my other videos on this topic in my astrology transits playlist, but they tend to be coming into maturity now. So they're coming into their power, very powerfully so. So it's like not only do we get a paradigm shift, but we also have the youth that is kind of carrying that forward. Many of these people who have Uranus in Aquarius from 1995 to 2003, if you were born during that period, also have Pluto in Sagittarius, again showing the kind of connection between all these themes, because Pluto was in Sagittarius between 1995 and 2008. They also had huge enemies, both Chiron and Prometheus. Of course, Prometheus for the gods who didn't think humans deserved fire, and Chiron who was saving souls from death, that Pluto was not too happy with. So these are two kind of archetypes that are extremely humanitarian and compassionate. Another note on Sagittarius is a lot of people who are born with Sagittarius placements come from very dire early circumstances, kind of the rag to riches, because Jupiter expands what it touches through optimism, and that kind of optimism in the face of difficulty, which is during Sagittarius season when the sun is descending before it finally hits Capricorn season or Christmas, and the sun begins to build again for the new astrological year. But there is definitely a sense of Sagittarius also relating to a uniqueness that primes them as targets for users or thieves. I mean, Britney Spears is one such example, as well as Miley Cyrus, I think, commenting through her work in Black Mirror on the role that her mother played in her life. Obviously, child stars are kind of used financially by their parents, usually. Aquarius, of course, rules the nerves, so when there's too much electricity flowing through the body, the pressure and stress of this expansion can cause jittery nerves, among other kind of issues and psychological issues. Another note on Sagittarius is that Mula, or Ketu, which rules the Mula Nakshatra, a subset of the Sagittarius zodiac nakshatras, is associated as being the most powerful Ketu sign, or nakshatra, as it can kind of subdue the demons with its purity. You can see on Clear Nakti's channel of The Final Girls, or the Bell from the Beauty and the Beast archetype. Rahu, on the other hand, rules Shatabisha, a subset of the Aquarius Nakshatra, of course, and rules the demon's head, and kind of can be associated with the beast archetype, kind of chasing for this expansion without maybe the proper level of groundedness in the lower part of the body that K2 represents, as K2 directly represents the roots of the tree, right? If we don't have any roots on our tree, it will die. Another note, of course, is Leonardo da Vinci had a Sagittarius rising, but Aquarius Shatabisha placements. So you can see that kind of interplay and how he kind of was able to expand so effortlessly on his innovations. And Rahu and Ketu, or Aquarius and Sagittarius, are extremely powerful. They rule eclipses, right? And these are periods of time when we as humans are definitely not advised to go outdoors and to kind of let the shifts happen before we kind of see where the clear ground is now, because this is such innovative, quick lightning changes. I mean, what do you think you get when you put electricity and water? Fire and water, right? Chiron also has a sense of rebelliousness, as it's saving, of course, people from death, so it doesn't really do it as directly as Aquarius, who represents more of a thief kind of element to share. They are both extremely compassionate, which obviously relates to the constellations of the great ocean that encompasses Aquarius and Pisces, and kind of, Pisces were just ruled by Jupiter, so Sagittarius as by default. Currently, as I film this, North Node will be shortly moving into Pisces to conjoin Saturn, Neptune, and Venus. And this will be ending basically an 18 to 19-year cycle of the North Node through the signs, all the signs. So that's interesting how that ending of a 20-year cycle basically is conjoining with Pluto, which just recently ended a 20-year cycle of Capricorns happening at the same time. So we have Pluto in Aquarius, as well as the North Node in Pisces, really kicking off the beginning of this 20-year era. So now we'll just move on to the Egyptian god, who kind of basically, a lot of Egyptian gods were based on Babylonian gods in Mesopotamia, but they all kind of talk about similar constellations, the same ones of Aquarius. So the water bearer of the Egyptians was Hapi, or Hopi, I'm not sure how to say it, Hapi or Hapy, but she was the god of the Nile and fertility. But she has a hermaphroditic quality similar to kind of Gemini and other air signs, relations to kind of dynamism, or the brothers, right? Two different faces. So this god actually has feminine and masculine qualities and traits, and genitals, etc. This god and the constellation of Aquarius was associated with the annual flooding of the river, which kind of is very funny coincidentally, as my dream last night, as Venus entered Pisces at midnight and conjoined the moon. Basically, I had a dream that a house was being flooded and there was a large river right beside the house that was moving very quickly, very quickly. It was so shocking how quick it was moving, actually how fast and powerful the currents was. It was scary in this dream that I had. So it's interesting that I had that dream, which represents all these Aquarian ideas regarding rivers and water and electricity and speed and dynamism. There's another name for this god as the Lord of the fish and birds of the marshes, because after this flooding there are marshes with plenty of abundance and creatures. He's also associated with many different kinds of water animals, from crocodiles to hippos to fish and frogs. And that kind of shows us that kind of liminality with the god Heket or Hecate, who rules magic and alchemy, another kind of theme that is relevant throughout Aquarius and Sagittarius as well. This alchemy from the venom to the cure, the medicine, the doctor, right? In Sagittarius to the kind of electricity and the astronomy and the astrology of Aquarius, and understanding larger overarching systems of time, which used to be ruled by Saturn, an ancient astrology which rules time. This river is also in the churning of it, which is associated with Rahu and Ketu and the dragon, right? And the dragon is represented with the flying serpent, and Sagittarius is Asclepius, was known as Saraswati. So it's a mystical river that represents knowledge, wisdom, and the flow of consciousness. And if you look in Indian mythology, Saraswati, the goddess of Saraswati or Shakti, and all those kind of things talk about this kind of electricity, this consciousness. Another interesting note is that the river's natural cyclical nature parallels the eclipses. So it's interesting, furthermore, how the eclipses in Rahu ties into Aquarius symbolism. And this is when the flow of the water or life is momentarily interrupted or changed. Aquarius, like the neighbors Capricornus and Pisces, is part of the sky referred to throughout the ancient world as the Great Ocean, or some similar term, clearly because this region of the sky is packed with aquatic creatures and watery symbolism. Pisces the fish, Cetus the whale, Capricornus the sea goat, Delphinus the dolphin, Eridanus the river, Pisces australis the southern fish, and Hydra the water serpent. There's also a lot of storms that are associated with this. Every time we have Moon in Capricorn, you'll notice the weather gets darker. So there's definitely a theme of this ancient flood archetype coming in, kind of to punish humanity if they don't get in line. And this flood obviously was brought originally in many mythologies by the gods to kind of clear and wipe the slate of the corruption that had happened in humanity. Also, mystery schools of Africa and the Middle East, as well as the Mediterranean, basically heralded the stars of Aquarius as representing knowledge and tales of magical secrets from the astral realm and the interaction with the physical universe. A lot of Aquarius people also tend to have a sense of restlessness, just like Sagittarius does as well. The electricity of innovation, right? Electricity flows fantastic through a conduit, a watery conduit. Water in tarot and astrology represents the unconscious, or spirits as well, grounding down elemental forces. Another thing is immortality is ruled by electricity, or things that give your body the proper utilization of nutrients and energy to sustain life. Enki, the god of vast intellect and the lord of the sacred eye, is also associated with the water bearer or Aquarius, which initiates a new level of development and civilization, i.e., a scientific or spiritual revolution. Another interesting tale from Hecate is the fact that the frog-headed goddess represents lily padding into quantum new realities. The priesthood of the deity Hapi, or the water bearer in Egypt, basically had duties to measure the level of water in the Nile as a part of their rituals. And this is kind of shows us the kind of connection to scientific revolution and instruments. Or the rod, right? The rod of Asclepius, the divining instruments that find water using electricity and communicating with spirits through electricity, electromagnetic fields, and that kind of polarity between ions and electrons and protons and all that kind of movement that causes change. Aquarius is also associated with predictive logic, right? Because Capricorn is math, it looks more to the past, whereas Aquarius looks to the future and what can we project into reality in the future. A lot of innovators like Leonardo da Vinci and blueprint buildings are very important with Aquarius energy, like building like a draftsman or something. Furthermore, with Pisces, which rules spirits and ancestors, ghosts as well, a lot of ghosts are seen as blue, right? That kind of, that center of fire that is electricity that is so associated with that, right? So auras, electromagnetic fields, colors, are also important here. A lot of Aquarius nakshatras are related, of course, tying in with Swati, which is Libra, in a trine formation there, shows us kind of how, and being the father of Venus, who creates beauty on earth and is the father of artists. Basically, we can see this kind of relation to creating something harmonious in reality, bringing more harmony to earth and beauty to earth and connections with people. The proper exchange, which Libra rules, the balance of the scales of harvest. So there is a kind of naturalizing, justifying force of the justice system very strongly with Aquarius as well. When Aquarius was prominent as well, the Greeks and the Romans introduced more of an emphasis on homosexuality and alternative lifestyles, which makes sense as well, as the representation of pouring liquids, but less so into actual kind of saving those liquids to kind of be used for enlightenment, right? And this is because Aquarius doesn't want to be connected with somebody else. When you have sexual intercourse with somebody, you have similar karmas. You're absorbing their karmas now. And so there is that kind of not wanting to break the binds of karmic patterns as well. So in order to kind of break free from this, you need a level of isolation, basically from greater society or specifically sexual matters. The symbolism of water, Genesis, or new life, and the omens of a dramatically changed future. A lot of Aquariuses are able to perceive uncommon connections and gain insight by linking disparate and seemingly contradictory notions together, bypassing altogether stages of logical connection. Capricorn knowledge is very one step at a time, but Aquarius proceeds this, right? So it evolves beyond it. Aquarius is the eureka moments when you're doing something random and it all just connects. Ghosts and spirits whisper wisdom and guidance, kind of like a lot of people feel inspired by gods, right? They get their inspiration from the heavens, right, for their art. And this is about the gods communicating through symbolism and signs and other kind of even just direct clairaudience as well. And this is kind of relating to Zeus or the god's large or holistic beneficial plan to help humanity grow beyond karma and karmic patterns, which Capricorn rules. There's also a connection between communicating astral forces with the physical universe, hence a lot of people seeing what they deem to be aliens, which could also just be angels, right? Or spirits of different dimensions, parallel dimensions, right? The practice of magical evocation by Franz Bardon is a comprehensive guide on the art of evocation, focusing on the practical, theoretical aspects of summoning spiritual entities, elemental forces, and energies. Franz Bardon was a Sagittarius, right? Bardon is a well-known figure in Western occultism, providing a step-by-step approach to evocation, blending elements of ceremonial magic, hermeticism, and practical spiritual work. So he was very tied to kind of hermeticism, which came about in Pluto in Aquarius, and a lot of occult practices were based on Franz Bardon's work. Principles underlying evocation, like the relationship between the magician, the spirits, and the elements, connecting the right, so you can see that interconnectedness of Aquarian themes. Creating just the right conditions for successful evocation. This includes preparing the mind, body, and environment, and establishing protective circles, using proper tools, example, candles or sigils, and entering a meditative focused state. Bardon provides detailed instructions for evoking a wide variety of entities, from elemental beings, earth, air, fire, water, to more advanced spiritual entities. He stresses the need for control and discipline, very Saturnian, right? As well as the ability to work, so to bring form, right? Because when we ever creating a form from something, that's where Saturn comes in and Capricorn comes in, being very understanding the kind of realistic issues with this and how we can mitigate them. He stresses the need for control and discipline, as well as the ability to work with these beings for specific purposes like acquiring knowledge, healing, or transformation. So that's very Pluto and Aquarius, of course. A central theme of Bardon's work is the necessity of maintaining control over the summoned spirits. He explains how to banish them properly once the evocation is complete. So that's very Saturnian. We can do great banishment with Saturnian elements and energies and transits to prevent unwanted consequences or interference. So this was kind of shows you more of that overthrowing the father archetype, having the boundaries to do that, to basically create new life. Saturn never wanted life to happen. If we had Saturn, too much Saturn, there would be a constricting of life. There would be less humans on the planet, right? Because of greed, because of fear, because of jealousy, because of control, right? Barden is a mandatory reading because many modern occult books are heavily inspired by it. Discovery that atoms can be split, or the breakdown, right? Pushing boundaries, fatal alignment, enlightenment, right? There is no going back to the dark when the lightning strikes come, no putting the genie back in the bottle, which kind of is reminiscent of Pandora, who was basically this box of kind of ailments that the gods tried to give to Aquarius to punish him for giving humans fire. So, Pandora and that whole mythology is very relevant as well. It's also like how in Indian practice you have to prepare the body to receive the elevated consciousness and energy, or it would electrify you and kill you and drive you mad. So this is about chakra alignment, right? The fire, the kundalini rising, the coiled snake that begins to fly from the base of the spine, the electricity that's communicated between the chakras to the brain and the pineal gland. Since the natural reality of the mental plane is an interconnected state, the thoughts and ideas in our minds are connected to other thoughts and ideas by invisible strands. Red is connected to orange and to yellow, but blue is further away, even though it's still a part of the idea of colors, and that's because blue can only be seen in kind of darker, blue light, right? The strands connecting these conceptual entities are composed of significance, i.e., they are astral in nature and have a strong personal component to them, and that is what Aquarius represents as a sign, the interconnected web of significance that is formed when our minds interact with the astral world, when the mental plane plunges into the great ocean. Thus, the sign is endowed with a unique array of antennae for operating and navigating in both the mental and astral plane, but what it lacks is a connection to the mundane or grounding energy. So that's why grounding for the next 20 years, which I always describe in my readings about the roots extending down from the base of your feet, because Rahu in Aquarius is very Rahu energy, right? That's all chase, 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 eclipse the sun, right? Eclipse the leaders in power. Whereas Ketu is about extending those roots out from the base of your feet into the ground, wherever you are, and pushing and exhaling all that kind of black gray energy out and breathing in white, golden, clear energy in. So doing these breathing exercises brings you to a state of stability, and you become a conduit and not just this kind of head without a body, right? Which is what Rahu rules, literally. So yeah, channeling so that you don't become a light bulb that just bursts through the high intensity. There's also a similar theme to the martyrdom of Pisces, of course, as well as spirituality through Sagittarius as well. And Sagittarius being ruled by Jupiter, which rules that kind of Pisces astrology of the ocean, of Neptune. The resonance all interacts together and produces an encounter that is all about how these resonances are interacting and seeking to harmonize. So very Venusian, balancing the scales, right? Like the two wavy lines, it goes back and forth in all directions simultaneously, revealing facet after facet of the resonances involved. This whole process is Aquarian, and it is the power source that keeps the physical and astral worlds communicating. This interaction between the astral and physical planes causes matter to organize itself in resonant fields. It's like putting cornstarch or sand on what music rules the stereo system, right? Pisces. It is a mechanism directly involved in the production of astrological effects. The organization of matter is made according to an astral blueprint, a blueprint that is communicated to the physical matter through numerous resonance effects. The astral force of an entity or thing is continually shifting state of resonance with the rest of the physical universe. So we can all kind of impact this interconnectedness, right? The kind of mushrooms that communicate under the ground, or the connection of our nervous system, and we're all part of a larger whole. In effect, we transmit resonance through the ether, which is very representative of Pisces, right? But this implies, and ether also, there's like a hidden element, which is plasma, right? But this implies a one directional flow, where in reality the flow is omnidirectional. So this is like talking more kind of when you study networking and computers and electricity and internet, you kind of understand more about how we kind of connect everything, frequencies and things like that. Due to the limitations of my editing software, please see part 2 to continue this discussion further. Thank you so much.